So we are in the year 2025, May of 2025 to be exact, and I can't really recall a time when Sony was in such a weird position with the PlayStation brand. Ever since the PlayStation 1 came out, Sony has been a powerhouse within the video game industry. But it seems like with the PlayStation 5 generation, there's been a few missteps here and there, and now those missteps are coming back to haunt PlayStation. And we're in a time frame where the future of first-party PlayStation games is a little bit up in the air. Now, I am someone who plays my PlayStation 5 primarily for the first-party games. The last game that I have actually played on my PlayStation 5 was Astrobot. So it's been quite a while since I have decided to turn on my PlayStation 5. And two of the games that were supposed to come out this year, or at least in the future, now are with a lot of doubt as far as those games actually releasing. So I guess my question is, how the hell did PlayStation end up in this position anyways? How did we get to this point where they were doing some of the best first-party games, and now we're seeing games that come out for 2 weeks and then get removed, and games that are having play tests of experiences that don't really seem all that great for the consumer that would be purchasing them? I want to explore all this sort of stuff and just kind of talk about it a little bit because I haven't really talked about it on the channel quite yet. So a lot of this obviously stems from the Jim Ryan era of PlayStation and really by extent Herman Holst as well, because those two individuals seemed very gung-ho on the games as a service games for PlayStation. We, of course, have heard many reports that they were working on 10 to 12 different games as a service games to come out for the PlayStation 5, and it really felt like there was a shift in mentality from the narrative-driven single-player experience to this sort of games as a service thing to maximize output and maximize profitability if these games were successful. And the thing about games as a service games is there is really no sort of definitive way to tell if a game is going to be extremely successful or not. For every game that's a Fortnite or a Marvel Rivals or something like that, there lies a wasteland of games that thought they were going to be the next big thing in games as a service games, and they ended up just losing money, a ton of money, and a lot of these studios end up closing down. But we really started to see kind of the quote-unquote fruits of these labors with a game like Concord, and Concord just didn't look very appealing. You can strip away all the stuff about the characters not being appealing and stuff like that, and whatever. I mean, if you weren't interested in the characters, you're not interested in the characters. I don't see what the big deal is. But the bigger problem was the game itself just didn't do anything that wasn't already really readily available on the marketplace, and that game cost you $40. Of course, Concord came and went like a fart in the night, and now the waste of Concord is still seen out in the atmosphere. You can't play the game anymore. People got refunds for it. The studio ended up shutting down. A studio that Sony had very high hopes in, a studio that Sony felt that Concord was going to be like the next big game. And really anyone with a set of eyes could look at that game and be like, oh, yeah, that's probably not going to be the next big thing. You know, it looks pretty generic in this sea of games that are readily available, some of them at a free price point. But that's not necessarily my focus, because my focus for this video is more so on two games that are in-house first-party games for PlayStation, although one of the games is multi-platform because of the budget deal that was done with it, and maybe the other game was going to be multi-platform as well, but that is Marathon and Fair Games, because these two games were games that were on the docket for PlayStation. Marathon's still supposed to come out this year, with many anticipating that Fair Games was also going to come out in 2025 as well. Now, Marathon, of course, is from Bungie, and Bungie is allowed to put their games on whatever platform they want to because of the deal that they signed with Sony, which many people question as to why Sony purchased Bungie in the first place, because it hasn't exactly been a pairing in paradise like many people thought. And then Fair Games, of course, was Haven Studios' new game with Jade Raymond, the person who hasn't released a game in a decade but still has notoriety for some reason for her past accomplishments. With Marathon, I think the problem started pretty much on day one. Marathon is trying to, at least a little bit, ride an IP from the PC days, the Marathon game. And when you look at those two games side by side, there's really nothing taken from Marathon, the new game, that was in Marathon, the old game. The gameplay style, the progression style of the game, the art style of the game, neither of these two things really are reminiscent of each other. It's really just in name. When you have companies getting purchased for large sums of money, you have to remember it's not the company name that makes the game. It's the people that work at the company. And if you're not buying the people, or you're not buying the contracts of the people who worked at the company during the company's prominence, is it really worth doing that? And I think you're kind of seeing that with Bungie right now. Yes, Bungie had great success in the past, but the past is the past. We live in the current age. And if you're not making great games in the current age, then what's the appeal? Of course, Marathon had a litany of problems beyond just the interesting unveiling of the game. It's now being discovered that they pretty much just stole the art assets for the game off of a person on Twitter, to the point of where Bungie developers actually followed this person on Twitter, yet never interacted with them. The person on Twitter who made all of these art assets actually put a meme in one of the art assets, and that was also used in Bungie, or in Marathon, I should say. Now, of course, Bungie came along and said, well, that was just one rogue employee, and they are no longer with the company, so rest assured everything is fine. And it's like, well, that's bullshit. It's your entire art department. How did this get through? How did nobody notice this? You're going to tell me that all of these people that work at Bungie in the art department randomly follow this individual on Twitter that they have never spoken to before, and it was only one person who took the artwork. It was only one person who took the art style. So it's only one person working on the art for the game? None of that makes sense. It's one of the worst defenses I've ever heard of a situation. This isn't a glove don't fit, you must to quit situation. This is obviously something that is rampant throughout the company, with people having to do a system of checks in order to put out this game information and showcase this art style, meaning that even if it was just one random art employee, you still have a litany of people who co-signed for this and signed off on it without doing any basic research. So to that I say, that is a horrible, horrible explanation. Of course, Marathon has also had play tests and stuff like that with mixed results, but now it seems like even Sony is losing faith in Marathon, as it's being alleged that Sony has pulled all paid marketing for Marathon, meaning that one of two things is going to happen. Either A, the probably not the situation sort of thing, that being that Marathon is just going to come out and release with no marketing attached to it and cross your fingers and hope for the best, or B, the game is going to see a significant delay and possibly a whole new restructure, considering you have to change a lot of the art stuff. When I looked at Marathon as a game, I watched some of that gameplay, and yes, the gun mechanics looked pretty interesting, but everything else just felt very bland to me. Even the graphical style of the game was a minimalistic thing, which some people dug, but for me, it just looked unfinished and unpolished and not really what I expect from the PlayStation brand. So Marathon doesn't look all that great. It doesn't seem like that's going to come out anytime soon either, but what about Fair Games? Because we got Jade Raymond at the helm, who did Assassin's Creed over a decade ago, but, you know, she's been finding work at a lot of places. Google Stadia, she got a nice check from them and rode off into the sunset. Well, Haven Studios is here to save the day. It was purchased by Sony for Fair Games, and oh boy, has this been an absolute disaster. First and foremost, I think the premise of Fair Games is decent, but the execution of it is not. You're trying to be Payday, but instead of being Payday, where people are just robbing banks because they want to make money, you have these sort of millennial characters in there, like these weird kids who are doing it to stick it to the man, and, you know, a pseudo Robin Hood style thing in a game that's coming from a billion-dollar company. So can I rob Sony and just be like, oh, I'm being Fair Games, you know? It's all fair here. And of course, we haven't really seen any gameplay from it except some minimalistic sort of shots of in-game trailers and stuff like that. But now we're hearing about the premise of the game, and it seems like it's a mixture of both a bank heist and an extraction shooter, and there's going to be PvP elements to it as well, which I don't think sounds terrible on paper. But here's the problem. The problem is that Jade Raymond has already left the studio. She's gone. She said goodbye. I am done with this. So she's gone. Why would she leave, though? Why would she leave before her baby was put out? I don't think she necessarily left on her own accord, to be perfectly honest with you. I think this was a situation where it was like, hey, this game sucks, and if you don't leave, we're gonna have to fire you, or some sort of situation like that. Very, very Sean Layden-ish, because if you actually knew what happened with Sean Layden, you would know that the story that's out there isn't exactly how it actually went down. So I think that's sort of how this went. We're hearing play tests come out about this game saying that it's not very good at all. And this, once again, is yet another games as a service game that PlayStation was so gung-ho on that seems to not be hitting the mark. Now, people like to say that PlayStation is having all-time profitability with record gross profits and stuff like that, and so they're fine. And in that instance, they kind of are fine. But I'm not really concerned about their profitability and their gross profit. Net profit would be a little bit more interesting, because obviously these games cost money to make. Concord costs money to make. Marathon costs money to make. Fair games cost money to make. You also purchase studios in order to fund these games and create these games. So I don't think the gross profit is necessarily showing the whole picture of things like that. But who really cares about the profit? We're consumers. We should be worried about the games. We should be worried about the experiences that we're getting. And yes, you have Ghost of Yotai coming out this year, which looks really good. You also have rumors of a June PlayStation presentation happening to sort of showcase upcoming games coming to PlayStation. But they've done things like that without having any first-party games. Realistically speaking, these third-party companies have been really the strongest facet of PlayStation, I feel, this console generation. And they're kind of lucky that Xbox has just been a smorgasbord of misinformation and misleading of their consumer base, and just their system sales are in the toilet, and they've kind of become the default system. Because I think as an experience-based system, the PlayStation 5 has honestly been a little bit underwhelming, especially if you're only playing it for the PlayStation games. I have had some great experiences on my PlayStation 5. I thoroughly enjoyed Spider-Man Miles Morales. I thoroughly enjoyed Ratchet and Clank. I thoroughly enjoyed Astrobot. But it seems like those are a little bit too few and far between. And the biggest problem that Sony has right now is, with this focus, with this concentration on games as a service games, at some point in time, you have to course correct. And we're not in the era of the PlayStation 2 or the PlayStation 3 where you can make a game in a couple of years and have it ready to rock and roll. These games take a lot longer to develop and a lot longer to creatively come up with. So it's not like a course correction can really happen overnight or anything like that. If you've invested all of this money into these games as a service games and then you lose out on that, it's not like you could just pull a single player experience that most people are playing PlayStation 5 for out of your ass and present it to the consumer, because you can't just pull things out of thin air. You have to put in time and effort to create these games. So the course correction, it's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be very interesting to watch. And I don't know why PlayStation thought that, like, this whole games as a service thing was the move. Like, I get it. It's almost like a drug addict. You know, you're chasing that high, and if you get that high once, you know, you always want to get that high again. But you have to realize that that's kind of few and far between. You know, that adrenaline rush, that success, if you will, of a live service game. Definitely not the drug addict side of things, but I think you could kind of see the parallel. You're just chasing that high that either you or other people are getting, and when you don't get it, it's like, well, what do you do now? You know, how do you fix this? How do you go about this? How do you go about your life and your creation and your business? So I don't know. I kind of rambled in this video a bit, but I feel like it's all encompassing. Then you have PlayStation removing PlayStation Stars just completely out of the blue, which was like a rewards program. And it's like, yeah, we're going to, you know, here's less. You know, PlayStation Classics, you know, the reason why I signed up for premium of their service, because they said, you know, there was going to be PS2 games. Has there been PS2 games, like a handful, and they were mostly games that already have released on things like the PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 3 versions of the games that already exist? And it's like, this is not what I expected. This is not what I anticipated. This is not what you told me this was going to be. But hey, at least I could play Toy Story 2 PS1. There are people that swear by it. It's like super good. I'm not one of those people because I never played the game and I don't really anticipate playing the game. But let me know in the comment section down below, how do you feel about PlayStation's current direction? Do you think that a course correction can be done in a timely manner, or is this going to be something that's going to take a long time? Do you think Marathon and Fair Games actually see the light of day and end up releasing, or do you think these end up in the Concord wasteland of games with a limited release or just getting canceled? Remember, Factions 2 died so that Marathon could exist. Firebun, just get rid of them. Just be like, you know what? We wasted a bunch of money on this. Write it off on your taxes. Send all those people packing. I'm sure the talented individuals will find work in other places. I don't want to see people lose jobs, but this, if you go to a restaurant and the food you get isn't good, you're not just going to keep going back because you want to support the restaurant. You're a customer. You're a consumer. This is a consumer industry. We have to think with our consumer hats sometimes. And if companies are not providing us what we want, we don't need to be buying the games. We don't need to be hyping up the games. You can call a spade a spade. That's just how this industry works. Or at least it's how it used to work until all the interesting people got involved. Anyways, guys, happy Memorial Day. I'm going off to my uncle's for a party to celebrate, or I guess you don't celebrate Memorial Day. In remnants of those who did not come home, enjoy your day. I screwed up the ending of this video, but that's fine because I screw up a lot of things. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.